After meeting with over 5,000 plus couples over the last 25 years, today I'm going to break down 4 communication mistakes that I see couples making that lead to constant arguments and keep them stuck. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to fix each one of them and resolve some of your toughest conflicts. Communication mistake number 1 is not establishing clear goals before they start talking. One of the biggest reasons conversations turn into fights is because we don't stop to ask ourselves, what's my goal here? How many of you have attempted to bring up an issue with your partner and suddenly you're arguing about 3 other things that are completely different and off topic? This happens because we're focused on the smoke, the surface level frustrations or irritations instead of the fire, which is the real heart of the issue. But it's not just about smoke and fire. It's about clarity. Conversations without direction are like setting sail across the sea without knowing where you're going. If you don't have a sense of what you're trying to accomplish in the conversation, what fire you need to be addressing, it's unlikely you'll reach the destination or solve the problem that you're actually trying to fix. I'm not saying that you have to pre-plan everything that you want to say or that every conversation needs an agenda. It's okay to vent or process things out loud with your partner. But even then, it's important to have a sense of why you're starting the conversation that you're starting. Are you looking for connection? Do you need to solve a problem together? Are you trying to address an unmet need? Just taking a moment to recognize the purpose of your conversation can make all of the difference in keeping the conversation on track. I worked with a couple who were stuck in this crazy cycle. They came to me frustrated, saying, we've tried communicating 1,000,000 times and it never works. Every conversation just turns into a fight. When I asked for an example, Sarah explained that she'd been feeling lonely in their relationship for months. She wanted more quality time with Tom, but didn't know how to bring it up. One evening, out of frustration, she blurted out, "You golf too much." Now, what do you think happened next? He started to defend what was so important to him about golf. He's like, you know how much I love golf. Why are you trying to take that away from me? And just like that, they were arguing about her hobbies, fairness, who gets more free time. And yet really deep down, the real fire was Sarah's loneliness and her desire for connection. That's what was completely lost in the smoke of golfing and hobbies. Both of them left the conversation feeling unheard, frustrated, and convinced that their communication was hopeless. This is where I shared one of my favorite quotes with them from George Bernard Shaw. He said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. The issue in that moment wasn't that they weren't talking. It was that Sarah hadn't identified the fire of her issue before starting the conversation. Without clarity, Tom had no way of knowing what she truly needed. If Sarah wasn't clear on her own goal, how could Tom possibly understand what Sarah's goal was about? I explained to Sarah and Tom that communication isn't about pre-planning everything you're going to say. It's about understanding the purpose of the conversation, knowing the fire that you're really trying to address, and keeping that goal in mind. If Sarah had paused to think about her goal before just blurting it out, the conversation could have gone very differently. And if Tom had have understood that she's feeling tense and needing to get a little deeper, he could have tried to inquire as to what the real goal of the conversation was about instead of taking offense. Instead of saying, you golf too much, Sarah could have said, I've been feeling lonely lately and I realized how much I miss spending time with you. Could we talk about how to make more time for each other? That kind of approach focuses on the fire, her need for connection, and invites collaboration instead of sparking defensiveness. When we discussed this, Sarah and Tom both had a light bulb moment. They realized that most of their conversations had failed because they lacked a shared direction. Without knowing what they were trying to achieve, they ended up lost at sea, arguing about the smoke and never addressing the real fire. So how do you avoid this? Step number 1, you need to clarify your goal before speaking. And before you start the conversation, ask yourself, what's the fire here? What's the real issue I'm trying to address? How will discussing this help us come closer together? Am I focusing on solving the problem, or am I just venting about the smoke? This doesn't have to take a long time, just a quick pause to center yourself and get clear on the destination. Step number 2, then share your goal with your partner. Once you've identified your purpose, start the conversation by letting your partner know where you're coming from. For example, instead of saying, "Why do you golf so much?" try, "I've been feeling lonely lately, and I've realized how much I miss spending time with you. Could we talk about how to make more time for each other?" Or instead of yelling out, "You never help around here," say, "Hey, I've been feeling a little overwhelmed and could really use your support. Can we figure out a way to divide things a little bit more evenly around the house so that we can both spend more time together?" When you lead with clarity and vulnerability, it helps your partner understand your intentions and keeps the conversations from turning defensive. Step number 3, collaborate on the solution together. Keep the focus on teamwork. In Sarah and Tom's case, that might mean brainstorming ways to spend more quality time together, like scheduling more weekly date nights or agreeing to unplug from devices during the evening. If the conversation starts to veer into the smoke, like arguing about hobbies or who's busier, bring it back to the fire by reminding yourself why you're having the discussion. "I don't want us to argue about golf. What I really want is to feel closer to you." When you take time to identify the fire and share your purpose and work together toward the solution, you set the stage for conversations that build connection instead of conflict. Communication isn't about planning every word or having all the answers. It's about knowing the destination and steering the conversation carefully and safely toward that destination. By focusing on the fire and avoiding the smoke, you can finally start making real progress. Moving on now to the second communication mistake I see couples making, and that is that they're not checking the openness of the other. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to communicate is not checking whether the other person in the conversation is open and ready for the conversation. Think about it like walking through a door. If the door is closed, you wouldn't just try to walk through it, right? You'd stop, you'd check to see if it's open, and if it's not, you might knock and wait until someone opens the door. Timing matters. Place matters. Energy levels matter if we're going to make a conversation work. No matter how good your intentions are, if you try to force the issue when they're not in a place to engage, you will hit resistance. That's why it's so important to pause and consider, is now a good time? Are they in a place where they can hear me? If they're not, don't force it. When the door feels closed, one of the best tools for starting a conversation is what marriage researcher John Gottman calls a soft start. It's a calm, respectful way to ease into a sensitive discussion. Here's a few examples of what a soft start looks like in practice. First of all, start by losing the spirit of trying to fix the other person. Focus on connecting with them instead of controlling the outcome. You can also use I statements instead of you accusations. For example, you could say, "Hey, I've been feeling overwhelmed," rather than "you never help." You can focus your feelings and needs not on blaming the other. For instance, "I miss spending time with you," instead of "you're always on your phone." Another way to soft start is to begin with appreciation or a positive intent. For example, "I really value the time we spend together," before addressing your bigger concern. Another tool to soft start is to avoid threats or ultimatum statements like, "I don't know how much more I can take this." That only creates defensiveness. The spirit of a soft start is where you stay calm and respectful in both your tone and your body language. Even if you're upset, the way you say something matters just as much as the words that you choose. When you check the openness of the other person, lead with a soft start, and create an environment where both of you feel safe, it's much more likely to lead to a productive conversation. Moving on now to mistake number 3 that are plaguing couples in their communication. It's that they don't pay attention to the emotions in the conversation. As Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas said, truth comes through the face of the other. If you pay close attention to the emotions of your partner, it will tell you everything you need to know, not just about where your partner is, but about the health of the conversation as a whole. There are the signposts that help us to decide whether to keep moving forward or to pause and to adjust our plan. I'm going to give you the compass of communication. Here's how it works. There are 3 key signs that show that the conversation is going well. The 3 things I look for are positive emotions. That's where you notice feelings of calmness, curiosity, or openness in yourself and your partner. You also can notice clear understanding. Both of you feel heard, and there's a clear sense that you're getting where the other person is coming from. And the 3rd signal I look for is growing trust. The conversation feels like it's strengthening your connection, not weakening it. When these signals are present, the compass is pointing to true north, and you're creating a space for clarity and progress. But what happens when the compass points in the wrong direction? You're going to have to adjust, right? And redirect the conversation. There are 3 key signs that tell you need to pause and redirect the conversation. Those 3 signs are negative emotions going up, with frustration and anger or defensiveness starting to take over. It makes it harder to focus on the issue at hand. The second sign I look for is understanding shrinking. You and your partner feel more misunderstood, misheard, and the communication starts to break down and get hazier and more confusing. The third sign I look for is trust starts going down. Instead of feeling closer, the conversation feels like it's pulling you two apart, weakening your connection. When you notice any of these signals, it means the conversation has shifted into dangerous territory, and continuing will only escalate the conflict. Instead, you need to pause, stop focusing on the surface frustrations, and aim to understand the deeper emotions and concerns behind the conversation and bring the conversation back on track. You might say to each other, "Hey, babe, I feel like this is getting tense. Can we pause so I can better understand what's going on for you?" By paying close attention to your emotional compass, you can stay on track and transform even difficult conversations into opportunities for connection. Moving on now to the fourth and final communication mistake I see couples making. That is, they put too much focus on where they disagree and not enough attention and focus on where they do agree. Here's what I've seen after 25 years of coaching couples. Even in the most conflicted conversations, couples usually agree on about 80% of what they're discussing. 80%. But instead of focusing on that 80% where they are together, they spend all of their time arguing about the 20% where they disagree. It's like being on a 10-day vacation where 80% of it's amazing, but 10 to 20% of the things don't go as planned. Does that small percentage ruin the whole trip? In what area of your life is 80 to 90% not good enough? Yet somehow in our relationships, we act like anything less than 100% alignment is unacceptable. There are some areas where you absolutely need full agreement, right? You need full fidelity, 100% honesty, 100% safety. But do you really need to agree on everything? Probably not, right? The goal in conversations isn't to avoid disagreement. It's to start by listening for where you and your partner agree. Look for the common ground and acknowledge it with your partner. It's a powerful way to shrink that chasm between you two and show your partner that you're really on the same team. Let me give you an example. Imagine your partner says you're always on your phone and it feels like you care more about social media than spending time with me. Your immediate response might be to instinctively defend yourself, right? Well, what about you? You're always on your phone too. But that approach only escalates the conflict. Instead, look for the truth in what they're saying, the areas where you actually agree with them. A better response might be, "I totally agree that our relationship has felt a little distance lately. I can see how we've both been spending too much time on our phones, and I can understand how alone that's made you feel. You're right. I've been on that app more than I should, and I'm sorry. And I'd love for us to work together to put our phones away and get back to doing the things that used to bring us closer. Do you see the difference? Instead of jumping straight into defending yourself, you're starting by validating their feelings and finding common ground. You're showing that you're willing to acknowledge your part of the issue, which makes it easier to work together on a solution. When you start by acknowledging where you agree, the disagreement becomes less threatening. You're no longer on opposite sides of the issue. You're working together to bridge the gap. Here's your challenge. Get good at showing your partner exactly where you're on the same page before diving into where you differ from them. Once you've done that, you can introduce your side of the story, your perspective, by using and instead of but. Practice saying things like, I see your point here, and I think we could work on this together. Or, you're absolutely right about that, and I'd like to add this, and this. Share your side of the story. Notice how and creates connection, while a but tends to draw a line in the sand. That one small word keeps the conversation collaborative instead of combative. By focusing on what unites you and your partner first, even the hard conversations feel more manageable. When you take the time to clarify your goals, to check if the other person is ready, to tune into the emotions of the conversation and focus on what unites you, you're setting the stage for real connection. So start today. You've got this.